I got a lot of giddy energy, y'all. It's Utena episode 20. I'm not gonna lie to you all. I sat down this afternoon. I was like, what am I gonna watch? And I was like, what was episode 19 of Utena? And I was like, Saionji. I was like, yes. Because last episode was a Wakaba themed episode, which I'm officially all about Wakaba themed episodes. I'm about literally everyone themed episodes except maybe Toga, but I'm sure I'll come around to his themed episodes because we all know they're going to happen eventually, right? But yeah, so Wakaba last episode met up with an old childhood friend who the childhood friend came to the conclusion that they love her, and she came to the conclusion that she loves Saionji. And I'm like, what? Which we talked about last episode has been prefaced since episode 1, so that all makes sense. But I was just like, Saionji's back, baby, and I have a feeling that this is going to be part 2 of that, and I'm super excited about it. So let's dive in and talk about it. We actually had a warm streak today, so it's a little warmer and crispier than usual. And I'm filled with all of this like anxious, excited energy. So I'm sorry if I'm all over the place. The coffee's not helping, but what can we do? So we need to tie into these comments that are going to come first, and then dive right into this episode because I have been waiting not very long, but as long as I could until the comments came in before I could record this. So, Raging Fish says, apparently this translation doesn't mention it, but the interview with Kane that they went to was actually supposed to be a counseling session. And okay, we talked last episode about Soji and whenever, what's his name? Whenever he went to the seminar at the very end of the episode to talk with Soji, he said that they had the reputation of holding counseling sessions. So all that makes sense now. The subtitles did translate it to interview, and I was like, interviewing for what? Like, what job opening is there? And so what job opening is there? Why are these middle schoolers going after employment? Is that child labor? But no, it all makes sense now. They're going to counseling sessions. Yes, because if anybody gives off the vibe of being a soothing presence, it's Soji. But yes, so that all makes sense. So thank you, Raging Fish, for clarifying that. Speaking of clarifying, Washo3415 says that Akio's name in Japanese means morning or born in the morning, or, could mean morning star, which could be tied to Lucifer. So, I don't know. I'm just saying. So, yeah, but born in the morning. Sure, Jan. Yeah, I believe you, Washo. I'm just like, seems an awfully big coincidence that the name could be tied to Lucifer. We'll see. I don't trust Akio at all. I don't trust him one bit. And we've talked about that in previous episodes. But Zakiel said that Kozu and Miki both need to let go of the dynamic they had in their childhood and their mutual obsession with purity. And I thought that was a really good way of putting that. I also think that idea of obsession with purity ties to a lot of characters in this show. It ties to Yuri and how they view their relationship with the girl they had a crush on and this kind of like pure love. It ties to Nanami and her pure love to her brother. It ties to Toga and his obsession with the pure revolution. And it's just, there's a lot of ways in which these triflings and issues with these characters all kind of connect, and that's a really good way of putting it. So thank you, Zakiel. HBanana7 said Nanami being signified by the tiny fan while Juri and Miki have a wall of windmills. It's pretty bonkers. And I thought that was cool that HBanana7 pointed that out. To me, what that symbolizes in that moment, since it's been brought up, is I feel like Nanami is trying to stir up and get attention for herself and be like, I'm in charge, I'm taking over the student council, and but I feel like at the end of the day, and we saw this in episodes past that, because that was around episode 14 or 15, I feel like we realized that Juri and Miki are just kind of humoring her and being like, yeah, sure, you're in charge of the council. Of course you are. But I don't know if they really necessarily view her as an authoritative presence. I don't know if they viewed Toga as an authoritative presence. I think they just dealt with him. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting to point out. Francesca White 4166 says, alike a lot of anime will have, and this is referring to Miki and Kozu's episode. The rest of these comments are referring to Miki and Kozu's episode, if you're curious, which was episode 15. Saying a lot of anime will have 14-year-olds save the world and do all this crazy stuff, and their age is almost irrelevant. They're treated like adults by the narrative. Ironically, since the characters in Utena both look older than they actually are, I feel Utena is one of the better anime in treating their children characters as children. The children may be acting in adult ways, but I feel that it's expected that the audience still sees them as children. And Zanacho replied to their comment saying, a bunch of children trying to act like adults, just revealing their childishness all the more as a result. And I'm like, yeah. And I think that's really something interesting because even though Akio is technically an adult, as we view him in the story, these characters are all like high schoolers and junior high age. So yeah, I do like that this is kind of playing on the idea of, you know, you think of My Hero Academia, you think of Naruto, you think of the Big Three, you think of a lot of series where these high school, like 14 and 15-year-olds are treated like they're 30-year-olds in saving the world. And while that is kind of like a power fantasy for a high school kid, because when you're in high school, you kind of do have a sense of powerlessness because you don't know the ways of the world, or a lot of the times that's the case, not always. But I feel like a lot of these stories can be power fantasies for young adults because it's like it gives them the chance to have control and power in a situation where normally they don't have access to that. Of course, the alternative of that is series like this series or Neon Genesis, where it shows that, yeah, no, you're kids and the adults around you, they don't know what's up either. So it's all kind of a messed up situation. Neon Genesis definitely goes more the route of the adults are sometimes more childish than the children. And here, there's not really a lot of adult presence. It's mainly just the kids. But you do, as the audience, like Francesca and Zanicho said, you view them as children and you can understand where they're coming from. It's actually done really well. And I liked that a lot. So thank you for those comments. And then Oliver Jajado had this one thing to say before they dived into the commentary for episode 15. And look, I am a pure, innocent, sweet summer child. I miss a lot of things because I'm not a sexual person in reality, so I don't get some of the jokes. But Oliver Jajado said, Anthe drinking Mickey's milkshakes is kind of amazing as well. I guess it's up to each viewer how sexually they want to interpret that metaphor. And I was like, oh! I was like, oh, wow. That is actually very sexual. Show? But we don't actually know Anthe's age. Is she in middle school? Is it all a lie? We don't know yet. We'll see. Are they aliens? We'll see. However, it says in the commentary for this episode, episode 15, Ikuhara elaborates more on sibling relationships and tells a little story to contrast them with romantic ones. And I thought this was very enlightening commentary. So it says the landscape framed by Kozu. This is something that happened quite a long time ago. I told a certain girl that I loved her, but she turned me down. I thought there were good vibes between us. To think that it was all in my head. Why? I love my big brother, she said. Well, that's a lie. That story was fiction. The reason sexuality is so often expressed in brother-sister relationships in the world of fiction is probably because there's the illusion that blood relationships are eternal. It's the dream of the eternal lover. Continuing with the lie, I tried pathetically refusing to back down. I couldn't accept it. But you're brother and sister. She declared she was not a woman, and then she said my brother isn't a man. So what are you exactly? My brother's body is a part of me, and my body is a part of him, she said. So the reason why I really liked this commentary is because that whole sentence, it's a lie, that story was fiction. What I like about it is it kind of establishes that for a lot of these characters, the tie that they have to their siblings is kind of a crux where they don't have to. In Kozu's case, she has this relationship with her brother and it's tied to her growing up and, you know, separating herself from him and creating her identity. Nanami's tie to her brother is a way for her to have someone to love her unconditionally when she doesn't believe that she's perhaps deserving of it herself in reality. And then there's Anthe. And for me, what I thought was interesting here was that when they say the reason sexuality is so expressed in brother-sister relationships is because there's illusions that blood relationships are eternal. It's that dream of the eternal lover. I feel like Akio is trying to manipulate his sister to believe that he's the only one that truly cares about her and truly loves her because he doesn't want her. I feel like he's the one with the insecurity. He doesn't want her to leave him. So he's like, well, if I'm your big brother and I'm the only one to take care of you, you can't depend on other people. And like that line last episode where he's like, oh, Anthony, I hope you find your prince someday. It felt so condescending because he's keeping her there. He's the one that's holding her back because he doesn't want to be alone. And he wants some eternal love. And he's trying to convince her that the two of them together is the only eternal love they're going to have. And then you have Mamiya, who has seemingly found a relationship with Soji. So it's like, well, what does that say? So this is really interesting. But yeah, it's the idea of, you know, framing a relationship with your sibling the way that it is so that you can always have somebody to care for you. Because, you know, by that mindset, relationships with strangers may come and go, but your family's forever. So interesting. Like your family's always a part of you. So yeah, fun times, right? That's so intriguing. But yeah, I've talked for over 10 minutes. I'm just so excited and ready to go with this episode. And I hope you all are as well. But I'm so giddy. I cannot wait. We just need to dive into this episode and take care of it and just see what it gives us. So we're going to start Revolutionary Girl Utena episode 20. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's go. Rose Academy Middle School and High School has so much drama. Oh my God, what a great episode. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about with this. I feel so bad. I feel so bad for Wakaba. I feel bad for Saionji. There's so much manipulation going on and talk about being special versus not being special in this. Oh my God. So I went back to episode 19 to look at the preview and it shows Wakaba here saying, I don't get it. How come Wakaba's been such a good mood lately? It's like, well, something special must have happened to her. I don't get it. How come Wakaba's been running home as soon as class ends lately? Something fun must be waiting for her at home. There's so much that I don't understand. But I do know this. Wakaba is my dear friend. Yep. Yeah. Oh man. And then it zooms in on the leaf and it's pink. Wakaba can flourish. Damn. Okay. So, okay. There's a lot of talk about what makes people special in this episode. And the title of the episode is Wakaba Can Flourish. Which to me signifies that Wakaba can be special. She can be. And it's, you know, a lot of times what we find makes us special is when others see that in ourselves. I think that a lot of times we think, oh, well, there's nothing special about me. And then you meet somebody that cares for you. And because they care for you and love you, that in itself proves that, yes, you are special. And I'm just saying, you know, Attack on Titan, Carla would argue that everyone's born special. Akio. So we're going to go back to that. But I would say, I believe old Carla, she'd kind of argue with there and say that everyone's born special. It's just whether or not you tap into it. So, anyway, so let's dive into this episode. I love that it starts out basically like an episode of Hanako-kun being like, did you hear the rumor? And so here's the thing. Not everybody knows exactly what happened to Saionji. It shows him being punished with expulsion for flagrant violation of the code of conduct. They don't exactly specify it there, but it says second year Saionji from the provost of the academy, which now we know. So we know now that in ties with the provost, we have this idea that over here, Saionji knows, surprising no one, Saionji knows Soji. All the gays know each other in this series. We'll talk about it in a second, but yeah, they do. So Saionji knows Soji, but also we need to make note that Toga knows the provost, And the provost knows Akio because he's dating and is engaged to Kanai, his daughter. And then Akio's sister, Anthe, has basically encountered Soji because Soji gave her the leaf pendant today. And I'm like, Anthe! So Anthe knows Soji. Nanami knows Soji. What are with these sisters knowing Soji? So yeah, and Nanami, which is Toga's sister, she knows Soji. Kanai's all these sisters talking to Soji. So that's basically it. Right? Oh my god, even Kozu too. Every sister has talked to Soji at this point. Right? So, but I like the idea that they talk about at the very beginning of this, that a lot of the girls that are like, what'd you even see in him? Well, didn't you like kiss a flute? Like you're practicing like you're making out with him, which is a very like middle school thing to do, like to kiss something, pretending it's somebody else. And then being like, well, didn't you buy prints of him and everything else? And didn't you do all this? And it basically showing how these girls were fangirling over Saionji for so long. But the moment he's 5 minutes away from him, they immediately drop him and they're like, oh, forget him. We're on to the next newest thing. Just showing how their affection didn't really mean anything because he was just like a flash in the pan hottie that they like thought was cute. And of course, as they're saying all this, they pan to the most pathetic look on his face when he thinks that he's hurt Toga and thinks that he slashed him and drops a sword. Like Saionji looks his most pitiful when he thinks that he's hurt someone. So it's like, oh my god, we're going to talk about Saionji in this. I kind of have come to not maybe respect is not the right word, but I've come to appreciate his character more. But they're like, man, he was dreamy, wasn't he? I wonder what he's doing. And they're like, yeah. And of course, Wakaba doesn't say anything because Wakaba wants him all to herself. She's like, I have fought to be recognized by this man. And then I ended up being the one to take him in. And now he's all mine. And she kind of covets him from the rest of the world. But we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. So these private dorms that Wakaba stays in are kind of away from everything. I did not realize that they were like away from the academy so much. Like you have to go down the stairs, across the road, across traffic, like past a little like bakery. That's where she sees the little rams, the little two cups that are like matching. And then the student housing south building, she goes down there and then goes in. And then there's our boy with his knapsack and his jean jacket looking like a 16-year-old. Oh, with his, James Dean look to him. But yeah. So let's talk about this. And she locks the door. Now, when she locks the door, it gives the impression that there's going to be something sexual happen that's private. But the reality is, she doesn't want anybody to know that he's there, not because she's afraid that people are going to catch them in the act of something, but because she doesn't want any of the other girls to take him away, because she feels like for the first time she's special because he chose her. So there's this idea of being chosen versus being naturally special. And this idea of being chosen. And for Wakaba, she believed that she was chosen to be with Saionji. Like she gets the opportunity to take care of him and all this. Now, I'm going to be very honest with y'all. I don't think they did anything. I don't think they were sexual at all. And the reason I say that is because aside from him like putting his hands on her shoulders when she was trying on the leaf, there is nothing implicitly sexual about any of the scenes with them. He is nice. He is pleasant. He is like a little puppy. And I'm like, he does not remotely act like someone who is romantically interested in her at all. And that's just coming from being around. And I have a lot of friends who are, queer or gay. And I'm like, they act like he acts like them. Honestly, around me, they're being like, hey, what's up? And how you doing? I'm just hanging out and having a good time. But like making no romantic sexual advances. And which good, Wakaba's in middle school. Good. But also I feel like for Wakaba, it didn't have to be that way. Like her having a crush and being in love with him was just, on a surface level of I have a crush on him, I'm in love with him. Isn't this like where it's like we're playing house, but there's not the adult side of it because they're in middle school and high school. It still feels, we just talked about in the introduction about things feeling childish. It does feel like that here, like you're still in school and everything. But even then, and I know there's going to be some people be like, Saionji's not gay, you're just making an assumption. Yes, I very much am. So if you disagree and don't think that Saionji is gay, that is perfectly fine. You don't have to agree with me. I'm just saying a lot of his actions do not warrant someone that is pursuing a relationship. And maybe he just doesn't like Wakaba that way. And he was just kind of like, thanks for taking me in. I'm just happy that you're a friend, and we're just friends and that's all. But even when he asked about Anthe and Wakaba gets really jealous, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, I think more or less he does care about Anthe because he was with her. But at the end of the day, Anthe was just a way for him to get closer to Toga. At the end of the day, he did, make that diary in exchange with Anthe, and I'm sure they developed a relationship, but at the end of the day, girl was his beard so he could get closer to Toga. That was the whole end of the game scenario. And he was not pleasant around her. And I honestly feel like the student council and I feel like Kiryu, they were toxic for him. Like they made Saionji act like kind of a dick. And then when he gets away from that toxic, source, aka Toga, he's able to kind of be like himself, and he's a nice dorky guy. Like he's just a dork. Now Soji and them call him a clown, and I'm like, damn, they're just viewing Saionji as a fool that they can use as a pawn, which sucks. Like it basically makes it to where Saionji's not special himself. He's just special because they chose him to use him as a tool, which is a problem. But anyway, we'll get back in there. So they asked him if he comes by, and he's like, no. And he's like, well, you came back rather late. And she's like, oh, I went and did a little shopping. Here, I thought you could use this. And then, now Saionji, to his credit, he says, forgive me, I promised to leave soon, but I'm still dragging my feet. Now, to his credit, he was upfront with her, and he wasn't trying to manipulate her, being like, oh, thanks, Wakaba. Thanks, Wakaba. I'll stay here forever. No, he was like, hey, I'm kind of dragging my feet. I need to leave. But she was like, oh, no, it's fine. You stay as long as you like. Everything's great. And I do like the little Kappa coffee maker, the little carafe for the coffee that's the Kappa. I want it. That thing's adorable. So cute. Love it to pieces. But yeah, she's like, oh, no, everything is fine. It's all good. And he's like, I've been expelled. I have nowhere to go. I have no friends and no money. So basically, he can't go home for whatever reason. Maybe he doesn't have a family. Maybe he's an orphan. Maybe he's afraid his family would, reject him because... And honestly, now that I'm saying it out loud, that kind of sounds like a narrative. I'm not gay, so I can't speak to that. But I know a lot of people who are queer that have that narrative of I can't go back home because of who I am, because I'll be rejected. And in Saionji's case, it could very well be the sense of I can't go home because if they find out I'm expelled, it'll be bad. Or I can't go home because I don't have a family. But you could also use the narrative of a queer student who can't go back to their family because they won't be accepted. And so he's like, I need somewhere to go. Wakaba just didn't realize she was a beard. She just didn't realize she became that. She has no clue that she's become the gay friend. That's like, oh no. He's like, I'm pathetic for coming back here. And he's like, you, with bravery of that, like, Jeanne d'Arc, have given me shelter. Like, he's just, he's pouring on the compliments to her, being like, thanks. He's like, but I can't stay here and leech off your goodwill forever. He's like, I'm going to leave before I inconvenience you. And she's like, oh, no, just stay. Just the fact that I'm able to help makes me happy. So I'm like, girl, Saionji tried to leave. And it becomes very apparent early on in this episode that he's not interested in using her romantically. He's not trying to manipulate her. He's just like, oh, thanks for doing me a solid. I'm going to leave now. And she's like, no, it's fine. It's fine. And she doesn't go all Kathy Bates or anything, but from Misery, but I can relate a lot to Wakaba because it's hard. I relate to Wakaba because Wakaba reminds me a lot of myself. There was someone that I liked in college, and I tried to do like lots of little gestures and kindness to them to try to appeal to them. Like, I would go and pick them up after school. If they needed a ride, I would go drive them places. I would inconvenience myself and sacrifice part of my days to try to make them happier or make them more convenienced. And I'm sure looking back, they just thought I was being nice and were like, oh, that's nice of you. Thanks. I guess, I'm not going to turn down someone's kindness. Sure. But in hindsight, I'm like, I was such an idiot because I was like, I wasn't upfront and didn't tell them that I liked them. I tried to play this game of, oh, well, if I'm kind to you and do all this kindness, you'll eventually notice and it will make you like me. That's not how it works. And Wakaba does the exact same thing here. She does all these little kindnesses and she takes time out of her day and sacrifices it so that he won't leave. Because I'm sure that if she just went about her day and stayed to watch Utena's, basketball game or the volleyball game from her other friends or hung out with them, he would kind of be like, yeah, I'm kind of mooching off her. I need to go and get back into the school and figure out what to do. So I'll just leave. And I think he would have done that and it wouldn't have been a thing. But she urged him to stay. And it's like, girl, you got to see the writing on the wall. If he's not making an advance towards you, he's not interested. And he's not. So it's just like, and that doesn't mean that he's gay, but I do still maintain that he's the most vulnerable and emotional around Toga. And it's like, I think that he is, but who knows? And she's like, oh, yeah, I'm sure the academy will be back. You'll be back in the academy in no time. And then when he again sits down and he's like, Wakaba-kun, and he's just sitting there crying, I was like, yeah. And that's not to say that makes him, I'm not saying that makes him gay. It doesn't. I know a lot of men that are very, very masculine and all that. And that crying and being kind of pitiful like he is not a sign that you're gay. I'm not saying that at all. It's just, I don't think that he's not. But I don't know. But Saionji is a very emotional character too, which I kind of like because he is portrayed as strong. He was a problem for Utena to deal with, somewhat. But I think what's more about his character is he's portrayed as the fool. That's what he's portrayed at. He's portrayed as the fool. He doesn't quite get it when he's being used himself. He didn't put two and two together when Toga took his diary and threw it in the fire. He does not understand what other people are using him for. And that's what makes him a fool. And that's really sad because I've honestly come to like Saionji. Like, this episode made me like him a lot. I was like, damn, when you're not in a toxic environment, you're actually a really good character. Man. But yeah, he just, she's like, here, this will calm you down. I like that she gives him coffee to calm down. And he's like, oh, thank you, Wakaba. And he grabs her hands. And she's like, oh, well, sorry. And he's like, oh, forgive me. That was terribly shameless. And of course she's like, well, I'm going to take a picture. She's like, she thinks that it's like the best thing because what woman wouldn't want, I mean, here's the thing. I say what girl wouldn't want a guy that would be like doting like he is on her, but it depends on what kind of guy you like. So that may be too whiny for you, and I totally understand that. But I get where Wakaba's coming from. Who wouldn't want, for someone to rely upon her makes her feel special. And that's kind of the point of the episode, is that she's always felt like a plain old onion girl. She's never felt like she's the one that's like special. So for her, this is kind of a big deal. And they're like, oh, your coffee's gonna get cold. And he's like, oh yeah. And then he like drinks it and he's like, well. And then I love whenever the girl knocks on the door and he scurries under the bed. That is the funniest damn, like he scurried like a damn mouse under that bed. That was the funniest damn thing. And she played it off like she was sick, and that was great. And then he just like scurries out from under the bed. I'm like, yes, please. That was so funny. I lost it. That was great. I'm getting so many screenshots from this episode. And then he pulls his hair up and he just like does the beautiful, like, it's natural. Just, of course, like tries to be like swooning with the hair and everything. I'm like, dude, I love Saionji. His hair is like its own character. I love his green hair when it's down. I love when it's up. It's also, again, we're not beating the allegations. if a man scurried under your bed to hide from women and then scurried back from under the bed and did this Vogue-worthy Vidal Sassoon hair flip, I'd be questioning his sexuality maybe a slight bit, but I'm generalizing. Who knows? Maybe he's just metrosexual. Maybe. But yeah. And she's like, this is my secret. Mine and his, our secret. But she did make the one guy from the last episode promise not to tell anybody, so... And then, of course, she's like, I've always admired you. I do love the one shot where she's, like, in the background trying to get him to notice her. And there's all these girls with sports bottles as he's done with kendo practice, like, just giving him a drink or whatever. Which, okay, also, just gonna say it, all these girls just waving phallic-like symbols in Saionji's faces, and he's drinking and slurping from every single one of them. I'm just saying we're not beating the allegations! I'm just saying there's a lot of proof in this series that I'm not wrong. But yeah, all these girls, and then when she finally confesses, somebody finds her letter and they put it up on the board, which may not have been Saionji, but she felt so sad, and then that's when she's like, I never thought I'd have a chance with him, and here we are, where I've actually gotten a chance to be with him for once in my life. I love Utena's basketball look. She's wearing the ring during it. I love her sports bra and her little red and purple combo. It's very 90s. I love it. It's great. She's out here playing with a bunch of guys on the court, kicking their asses. It's a great time. So, and then these girls are playing volleyball. I like the 3 guys that are after Nanami are playing with like a Ouija board. And she's like, no. And then she rushes home. But what does she say there as they're coming away? She's like, no, I'll pass. And then she says, as she's walking home there, what does it say there? I wanted to get the exact dialogue that she says as she starts running back to see him. She's like, the new me is special. As long as the secret is mine, I am actually special. Which is really sad because it's like, I feel like she could have been special with the one guy that asked her out, but because Saionji is more exclusive, and I guess the better, like the more, has more notoriety, it makes her more special than just dating the one guy. But I kind of hope she goes back to the one guy that asked her out, because she could be happy with him. I feel like if she gave him a chance, they were, you know, childhood friends and all that. But it's like having this secret love allows her to be special because it's only hers. Right? Which I feel like that's a lot of people with monogamy and a lot of people with relationships. It's like you're just with that person. It's something exclusive. So you do feel special because you're the only person that gets to be with them. Right? So Utena starts to notice that Wakaba's different. And I like Saionji with his little ponytail as he's like just loafing around the room, just hanging out, whittling. And she's like, I left you lunch money. And it's like, oh my God. And then they have their track suits. All of their sports suits are adorable. And her graph that she makes for this one class using the old school projector, I had that technology in high school, so I knew what that was. I'm sure a lot of people now in Gen Z are like, what the heck is that? Oh, it was a fun time. But I like that the graph lines are red and green like a rose. Of course they are. And then she does great at the recital. She does amazing at tennis. Like, girl is just having the best time. She's just living her life and having a ball. And Utena's like, man, is this what being in love feels like? Interesting. I also like that she's stretching as she's waiting for Wakaba to get done for the day. Like, she's going to be like, if I have to track you down, I will be stretched and ready to go. But yeah, so she asked Wakaba something different. And she's like, you know, you look a lot prettier than usual because you look happier than usual. I feel like because Wakaba's so happy, it reflects off of her and makes her feel, you know, like she's more happy and in tune with herself. Also, can we talk about the animation in this episode? Like the shadows and the lighting throughout it, especially when Utena and Wakaba are fighting, it looked really, really good. The animation was spot on. I loved it. Okay, I don't know why Utena is, one, why Akio is sitting there in a chase lounge. Just sitting back like he's a therapy patient being like, okay, Utena, tell me more. And Utena's sitting here like doing these yoga stretches. I mean, I guess they had to find a way to animate it to make it look interesting, but I was like, what is happening? And she's like, she's totally different now. Like the kind of goddess whose name gets written in the stars. And then Akio's like, well, why'd she just get prettier all of a sudden? You don't understand, do you? You, following your predestined path, there are special people in the world, and they always receive notice. You, for example. And she's like, me? Now, if I were Utena, I would be asking myself, why does he know that I'm special? Is it because of the ring? Is it because I'm a duelist? I would be asking him more questions, but she doesn't ask the right questions. And then he's like, you aren't aware of it, are you? It's a special quality you're born with. And she's like, oh, most people are but one among the many. But given the smallest chance, they can shine with a light that they never had before. So it talks about that few are special. Few are born special. Few are born special, but some get opportunities to be special. And for Wakaba, she's not born special, is what Akio is hinting at, so she's getting the opportunity to be special. Now, again, Saionji's just sitting there whittling away while they're drinking coffee and she's on her phone. Again, making no real romantic advances, but it's okay. I like seeing Saionji in different outfits too, which is fun. So she has this family size, what's it say, carving family size. So she got him this carving thing and is like, what are you making? And he makes her like a little hairpin. He's like, it's a secret. And she's like, for the longest time, I've just wanted Wakaba to be happy. And then he gives her the leaf pin. She says, oftentimes one moment of being special doesn't last long. And then we see like the shot of them in the mirror. That looks so damn good. That's such a good shot. It's so beautiful. The animation quality of this episode was really good. Like, I thought that was beautiful. He's like, it's not much, but I wanted to say thanks for everything you've done for me. And she's like, oh. And then, of course, she like, this is all she ever wanted was to get recognized and be treated special. Now, we'll talk about Saionji's big boo-boo goof up here in a little bit, but that was really nice of him to go out of his way to make her something, right? So, she's talking about what's been going on since he has been gone. And she's at the grocery store getting them stuff to make, and she says President Kiryu hasn't come back to school yet. So Nanami is filling in for her brother at the student council. Now, we don't get to see Saionji's reaction to that. We just get to see a close-up on his uniform during that moment. And then it says, well, Miki seems to be doing his best to help her. And Juri is the same as usual. She's she's the same. She's not changed. And that's how things are going for the council. And he's like, oh, yeah. And so then he's like, as he's painting, he's like, by the way, she's like, ask me anything. And he's like, how's Anthe doing? And he kind of hesitates to ask about Anthe. And I feel like, to me, he doesn't want to give off the idea that he's too interested, but he does want to know. And it makes sense because he was around her all the time. Also, it makes sense that he's asking about Anthe because he kind of was a dick to her and shoved her around and hit her a lot. So him asking how she's doing, I could see him wanting to know to make sure she's okay. Do I think he's remotely interested in her? No. I think that he just, it's kind of like, it's interesting. Anthe to Saionji, it kind of gives me vibes of like a drug addict where he was like addicted to the power that being with Anthe gave him. And then he got away from it and kind of like cleaned up his act and was fine. And then it's kind of like, it's, asking like, well, how's those cigarettes doing? And then, it's basically like you don't want Saionji to go back to being with her because it brought out the worst in him. And he's a lot better this way. So I kind of hope he doesn't regress once he goes back to the school. And the moment that he asked how Anthe was, her face dropped. And I know exactly what that feels like. Because when you like somebody, but then you realize that they might like someone that's not you, and you've been doing all these great things for them, then suddenly you feel like you're used, you don't feel like you're special anymore, and you feel like you're being taken advantage of. But the thing of it is, she's not being taken advantage of or used because she's putting herself in this situation. So then it just makes her feel bad because she's like, I'm being an idiot. And it's like, oh, it sucks. So I get where Wakaba is coming from, even though we, the audience, know she shouldn't be jealous. And she's like, Himamiya-san, he called her by her first name. And he's like, I was just curious. But then she's mad. I also like that the Wagyu steak cost the same amount as the carving kit. And she's like, Saionji wants to get back into the academy. And when he stops living with me, he'll forget all about me. And I'm like, that's kind of the sad thing, is that the sad part is that she believes that he will leave her and never talk to her again. Which, he is a baka, so her concerns are probably justified. But the thing about it is, she doesn't talk to Saionji about any of this. Because I think in her heart, she knows that Saionji doesn't really like her romantically. She's just created this fantasy where she can be special. And he's kind of reciprocated it a little bit. So it's given her hope that maybe one day it could be. But I'm like, girl, if you were really, really concerned about it and you really thought there was a chance he could like you, you should talk to him about it. But she won't do that because I think she knows the answer is he's going to be like, well, I'm just staying because you said I could and you were being nice. And then they'll just validate her fears. So, of course, her ugliness is her jealousy, and that feeds the black rose that Mamiya picks, right? And of course she looks angry as she's walking back, right? So then Saionji, she's already in a bad mood, and so Saionji's been working on this little leaf thing, and then he's stretching, and all of a sudden, how did Soji get in there? How'd he get into their room without him knowing the door was open? How'd he get in? Can he teleport? We don't know. Saionji's kind of a dunce. Maybe he didn't notice. What an enviable life you lead, Saionji Kyochi-kun. And he's like, Mikage, it's been some time. He's like, when did you get in here? Why are you here? So, again, these men, the gays meeting up in the room and talking about all this stuff again. So Saionji knows Mikage. Surprising no one. Of course these guys know each other. He's like, why are you here? And he's like, well, the Black Rose Society is privy to all the secrets in the academy, no matter how small. We know everything. And he's like, but you don't have to worry about that. He's like, once vice president of the student council, now reduced to freeloading with a female student. I feel like he throws that in there to be like, you're just hanging out with a broad, like all this. And Saionji's like, what? I'm just, getting back on my feet, sir. Sorry that I'm an orphan or I can't go anywhere. And then Saionji's like, well, I'm not going to just sit here forever. He's like, I'll eventually return to the academy and I'll return to the student council. And Mikage is like, okay, sure you will. And he's like, how are you going to do that? And of course, Saionji's like, I didn't think that far ahead, but I know I can do it. Because it's like, who's going to overrule the expulsion? But we find out later that Soji gets it overruled anyway. And he's like, after all this wasted time, what are you going to do? He's like, how about this? You could fight back if you had just a sliver of our power. And Saionji's like, how do I do that? And he's like, the future prospects of the academy distress us. He's like, there aren't any good duelists. They all suck. So we need you to come back. And he's like, talent like yours is very precious. And so Saionji kind of is like, it's very much stroking the ego of being like, okay, fine. How do I get back? And he's like, I just need this one object from you. It's nothing. A token, merely a trifle. Like Soji's out here being damn Ursula and doing this. But this is the part that's kind of messed up. Is one, Saionji gives him the leaf. Saionji makes a deal with the devil, gives him the leaf so that he can have an opportunity to go back to the academy. He does. And that's kind of a dick move because I'm like, Saionji, you promised that leaf to Wakaba. And I know that he's a high school boy that didn't think it was of any value. But I'm like, don't go promising things to people and then giving them away to someone else. Even if you don't know how much Wakaba thinks it's special, that's still kind of a dick move. Because then that's saying like, it means that you didn't feel that special about giving the gift to begin with. And it was kind of a half-assed gift to begin with. Because then later he's like, well, I'll just get you something more expensive. And it's like, but you missed the point, Saionji. This point was you made her something special. You can't just go back and buy something else. Baka, why are you an idiot? It's like... But then the other implication is that Soji went and found Anthe, knows where she is, found her and was like, here you go. And she's like, okay. Anthe is such a mystery because I'm like, girl, how much of this do you know what's going on? How much of this are you oblivious in? Because Utena is oblivious. Girl is like oblivious to what's going on and does not connect the dots. I'm like, how many dots have Anthe connected? And how privy is she in part of this? Because then when Wakaba sees it and looks back on it, that look when she looks back, it just like justifies all of her fears and gets her to go to the counseling session. And she's like, no matter what I do, he's always liked her from the start. With her face that says she and only she is special and would take anything away from me. I don't have it in me to turn the other cheek. Which means like Wakaba has the same problem that Kane did, and that they're all kind of jealous of Anthe and that she's special. And I'm like, girl. She's like, whether in love or in my studies, I'm nothing but another face in the crowd. But if he's there with me, then that girl. And that's when Soji's like, okay, let's go. And Wakaba looks so determined there. She's like, I'm ready to throw down. Stick this black rose into my heart. Let's go. And then she comes back. He's like, I didn't think he'd ask for that thing of all things in exchange for giving me what I wanted. But I couldn't stay like this forever. And then I like that Saionji's so oblivious. He's like, I'm going to set off to a new age of glory and go back to the school and start again. I'm like, you're such a damn dork. And then, of course, she moves like a freaking zombie to get him. She's like, where's the hair clip? And he's like, oh, something happened and I can't give you that anymore. He's like, I'll buy you something expensive instead. And I can mail it. And she's like, no, I have something better now. And then she like runs up after him and takes the sword out of his chest. You know, like you do. Ugh. Crazy talk. And then Utena's like, well, shit, I was looking for Wakaba and now I got a dueling request. Like we do. I didn't know that there was the little wives' tale that foxes have to get married on days when it rains and it's sunny outside. The old wives' tale where I live is that if it's sunny when it's raining, that means the very next day it's going to rain the same time. That's always been the thing. Like if it's sunny outside and it's raining, you can check the time and whatever time that is, the very next day it's going to rain again. That's always what we were told. So I thought the fox thing was interesting. But with the Shadow Girls, they talk about how like, well, on a sunny day and it rains, us foxes have to get married. And that's the custom. And then the other girl's like, well, for us bunny girls, when it snows, we have to wait for it to snow on a sunny day and then we can get married. And what do they say at the very end there? They're like, or you could just not. So I feel like to me, the Shadow Girl statement there is like, oh, well, we only get to do these things under these special circumstances. And the idea of being special in reality is a lot of mind over matter. Because, yeah, there are, sure, people in the world that have special circumstances happen to them. And there's nothing you can do about it. But a lot of it's just random. And a lot of it that keeps people from doing things that would make them happy is just themselves. Like, if you want to be happy, if you want to go get married, just go do it. If you want to go do this one thing, just do it. Don't discount your ability to do it because you don't think that you're special. What I liked about the duel is that when we get to the top of the thing here, what I like about the duel is that this duel is different than any of the other ones we've had so far, in that Utena is like, shit, it's Wakaba. And we see all the different colored leaves. And Utena's like, I can't do this. I can't fight her. And I was like, all you have to do is take a rose off her. You don't have to stab her or anything like that, Utena. But she doesn't want to fight her friend. And I do think it, and of course, Anthony's like, hey, come get this sword. This is important. You know, she's going to try to kill me. And Utena's like, I can't fight her. Now, I will say, I do feel kind of bad for Wakaba because the color of her jacket looks like a dying rose. Like, it looks like when a leaf starts to wilt. It also looks like poop. It's just beige. It's just like this olive brown. It's like the ugliest color, and the tassels are black. It does not look appealing at all. I'm like, girl, nope, not good. And her running at her, and then Utena's like, I can't do this. I can't fight her. And she's like, I'm gonna kill her. And Anthony's like, hey, get this sword or help. And instead, Utena jumps in the way as she's saying, I'm going to kill the girl who stole Saionji-sama's heart. And Utena's like, wait, Saionji? And then that's when she, like, connects the dots. I'm glad that she didn't get hurt. I thought Utena was going to get, like, kebabbed for a good portion of this duel. But instead, she manages to get Anthony out of the way. As again, the animation is so damn good. Like, poor Anthony. Anthony nearly gets hit by the sword. Utena nearly gets, like, it barely misses her, where it does cut off part of her hair. And then, oh god, just the animation's really good. And Wakaba. And says, why are you doing this? You've been shining so bright, so why? And she's like, well, you wouldn't understand. And Utena's like, what? She's like, you can't understand. And Anthony's like, if you could get the sword now before she kills me. And that's when Wakaba says, and then Utena's like, oh, it's Saionji, and realizes that she's been having a crush on him this entire time. And she's like, well, shit, I didn't put two and two together until this very moment. So then it says the lyrics say the piteous old grandsire. Why are we talking about grandpas? So Anthony gets knocked down to the ground, and she's like, stop, Wakaba. His antique sword. Okay. And man, the animation's great too, like her striking her. And so we see poor Anthony getting hit by Saionji. And saying his antique sword rebellious to his arm. Meaning the grandpa's sword that doesn't want to listen to his command. Okay. And then we see the leaves. Yep. And God, Utena getting knocked down. And then Wakaba grabbing Utena's hair. Like that part was crazy. She says he strikes wide, but with the whiff and wind. And she's like, you and her and the student council, you all look down upon me. Of his fell sword, the unnerved father falls. So it's kind of like the lyrics are suggesting that the grandpa's sword being used by the father, like one generation, the next generation using the sword. That's interesting. And then Wakaba, like, all of this getting projected on her, saying that they look down upon her. Utena's like, we don't look down upon you. What are you talking about? She says, without a care, flaunting the power you are all born with. Well, that's interesting, because that goes back to what Akio was talking about, was that the student council members in Utena, they all are born special with these special abilities that Wakaba can't relate to. And she's like, why do you get to be special and not me? And it says, then senseless Troy, seeming to feel this blow, or we're talking about like of Helen of Troy, so that all of you can so happily with flaming top stoops to his base, trample on the rest of us, and with a hideous crash takes prisoner Pyrrhus's ear. And then I love at that moment that Utena stops her before she can strike again. Because Utena's like, look, I don't know what this is all about, but nobody is trying to, like, trample over you. No one is trying to do this. No one knew what was going on. She's like, there's stuff that I don't understand. As the lyrics say, his sword, which was declining on the milky head of the old king, seemed in the air to stick. She's like, but I do know for a fact that you're my friend. So as a painted tyrant, Pyrrhus stood. She's like, you're my dearest friend. She's like, and I'm not going to fight you. Hold on just a sec. I'm going to save you now. And I love that, back in episode 12, Wakaba was MVP and got to save Utena, and even though Utena, she was mad, even though, you know, she was mad and Utena was being all down in the dumps, she stood by her and stood by her side and helped her, and now Utena's doing the same. She's like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna make sure you're okay. And then she like flips them and spins them around, and it says, after Pyrrhus's pause, aroused vengeance sets him new a work. And then I love the fluid animation of her taking the sword and grabbing it for herself. Hell yes. As all of the desks start to combine, it says, and his bleeding sword. And then she just strikes the rose away. And it feels like a play. Now falls on the old king. I love that shot. Yes. And then it shows the grip fade away. Ah, that whole thing was amazing. The animation between Utena and Wakaba. Yes, please. That was so good. I loved that. Oh. And then just seeing her fall back in the lighting. It looks so good. Poor her crying. Sad days. And then the bells ring. And of course, Saionji drops the leaf onto the body and another one bites the dust. And then Saionji says, taking out the trash is usually for the best, but as long as Saionji plays the part of a clown, he's more entertaining to keep around. That makes me feel so bad for Saionji. I'm like, all Saionji's trying to do is just figure out why Toga's the way that he is and to be close to his friend, and you guys are just gonna use him as a pawn? That's so mean. Why would you do that? Oh, I hate that they just treat him as a clown and they're going to keep him around to make fun of him. And they're like, well, he's back. The nerve of him. I heard the Black Rose Society put in a good word for him. I like that he comes back and everybody's really skeptical and they're like, what the fudge? I do feel so bad for Wakaba, though. She gets back to her apartment and is all alone. What the fudge? So, hold on just a second. Okay. I wanted to know, in episode 20, about the lyrics and what ends up being said about it. Interesting. I don't know. I want to try to avoid spoilers, but and see if there was anything going on in the lyrics themselves. I wish I could look that up. Duel song lyrics. Will it give me anything on that one? The chorus on that one, maybe. Okay. It said for episode 20. I'm assuming this was it. Yeah, for the chorus for episode 20, it said, the plank... Now, this is a little bit different translation than the episode. It says, the plank filleth his field of vision, though an old man put all his strength into his well-trained blade, his withered arm is still pathetic. Missing his aim with a swish of the sword, he stumbled and falled, O old man. The sword howleth and burned the summit. O the fortress tower of Troy, fallen struck by lightning. They don't mention anything about Pyrrhus in this. Oh, they say Pyrrhus's ears shall grow deaf. Look, white-haired aged king, swung and raised, the sword halted in the sky. Pyrrhus stands petrified, and will soon return this violence. Aim the blade dripping with blood at the aged king and strike him down. I guess what the sword lyrics are trying to say is that this man was special, and he had basically honed his blade to help him, like, in keeping his status of being special, but after time he's no longer special anymore and someone else is going to take the blade and take that specialness from him. I guess that would make sense with Wakaba fighting Utena and trying to take away that special privilege in the moment, but I feel for Saionji because he's being played and manipulated and they're just keeping around to use him as a pawn. I feel bad for him. I feel bad for Wakaba because now she's by herself and doesn't feel special anymore. And I'm like, girl, if you are in that desperate need of a boyfriend, go hang out with that guy that tried to confess to you. But, and that's kind of the sad thing too, is that there are a lot of people in the world that believe that they can't be special unless they're acknowledged by someone. And that's such a hard line of thinking to get around, is that you don't need someone's acknowledgement to be special. Like, you have all of that potential within yourself. You just have to figure out a way to channel it. And a lot of people just don't. They think that they need something to reflect a light off of them before it can be noticed by anybody else. And I want to look at the preview so bad, but I'm not going to do it. This episode, I knew what was coming. I knew we were at least going to get some Wakaba and Saionji business happening, but next episode, I have no clue. No clue whatsoever what is about to happen. Oh my god. But Saionji's back at the academy. I'm really looking forward to him showing up, and Nanami and Juri and Mickey are going to be like, you're back, sir! And what about Toga? Honestly, Toga's the only person we have not connected with yet. And here's the thing. Saionji has had a sword taken out of him by Wakaba. Mickey has had a sword taken out of him by Kozu. Nanami has had a sword taken out of her by Tsubaki. Juri has had a sword taken out of her by Shiori. So if Toga comes back into this, who's going to take a sword out of Toga? Is it going to be Nanami? I don't think so, because she's a duelist. So who would take a sword out of Toga? Is it Soji? I don't think so. Is it? That's the big question. I have a feeling Toga's going to come back into the equation, but how, and is he going to have a sword pulled out of him, and by who? Or is he going to pull out a sword out of somebody else? Honestly, here's the thing. I don't trust Akio one bit. I don't trust him a bit at all. He's gaining all this information about Utena and her friends and who to target. I don't know for sure if Akio is in communication with Soji or not. That part is unclear. I don't know. Here's kind of the disconnect here, is that Anthe is the Rose Bride right now. Right? I feel that Akio knows this. Anthe is also hanging out with Utena, who they are connected with one another. Akio seems fine with this so far, because Utena is connected to the prince, and Akio seems invested in the prince. So as long as Utena and the prince are somewhat connected, Akio is okay with this relationship, because he's like, if it somehow frees the prince from his little prison or keeps him there, fine, whatever. Meanwhile, over here, Soji is with Mamiya. Mamiya would like to take this power away from Anthe and become the Rose Bride himself. However that works. But my question is, I don't know if Akio and Soji are in communications with one another. I would like to think that they're not, or that they are against each other, because I don't know if Akio would be okay with Anthe not being the Rose Bride, because then we wouldn't have the connection to the prince anymore with Utena. So I don't know how their relationship between Soji and Akio is not sure yet. But if I were Akio and I didn't want anybody messing with Anthe, and I found out that Soji had been interacting with her, I guess unless he doesn't suspect Soji for any reason, I'd be like, what does that mean? So Akio is a big mystery. The connections with all of them is a mystery, but we're getting there. I can't wait to see the commentary for this episode and the previous one. I also can't wait to hear your comments down below. Y'all, Utena doesn't miss. And this second act, the Black Rose arc, I'm loving every episode. It's so damn good. Yes, please. So, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week, y'all, with episode 21 of Revolutionary Girl Utena. I'll see you there. Bye!